Welcome back to the Roundtable, episode 9. 6 people, 3 same. Everyone here is returning, so they've been on the show before. A few people reached out. A few people I said, hey, be on the show. So this should be fun. Zach Ford, you're on the show again. What'd you bring this time? Is it a movie you've seen before, or is this a movie that you haven't seen? Because you did that with Paper Moon.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to alternate experimenting with things I haven't seen and some old-time favorites. So I brought the movie Moscow on the Hudson, a movie I actually saw at a pretty young age. It was a movie my mom really loved and just happened to be on TV. Then I revisited it as an adult, and I find it kind of a sleeper that has a lot of great things that people don't really take the time to remember and think about in the career of Robin Williams. It's really one of my favorite movies of his. I have a lot of thoughts about Robin Williams acting I really thought about during this, but we'll kind of save it on there. But I think this movie is slyly very thoughtful about immigration and the idea of American freedom. I think on a surface level, you can view it very kind of patriotic, as America is all that matters. But I think there's some subtle digs at the American culture. And
I think we're just doing intros right now.
Oh,
it's all right. We were just doing intros.
You asked what I brought.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
It's a long title though. People don't know.
Long title. We were just chatting.
Saw the title of that.
I'm glad we got your initial thought. We'll talk to you in a second about your movie. I just want to see what you brought.
By the thing. Yeah.
I said you should have said macaroni and cheese. You just told me the recipe, but it's all right.
I brought a lot of nonsense.
Next up, Scott. Just the title of your film. What'd you bring and how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I brought the 1978 film Girlfriends, directed by Claudio Vile. I think Zach's description of his movie was longer than my entire film that I brought. So
I think that is true.
You need at least 100 more words. Come
on. Returning always Brian. Brian, what'd you bring us this time?
You don't care how I'm doing, but I'm doing fine.
No, yeah. How are you doing? Zach threw me off.
I brought a small little independent movie from 2017 called Dave Made a Maze, which I brought basically just because it's unlike anything you've seen before, and it's just, if nothing else, it's super creative.
I can attest. He does make a maze. We'll get to that later. Next up, Kirk. How you doing? You brought Bugsy last time. What'd you bring us this time? And how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. My movie is from 2004. It's called Primer, underseen movie that I just want to get more eyes on.
All right. And Boatman, you're back. I can't even remember what you brought last time. I know it didn't pop off, but
it'll make great conversation.
Yeah. What'd you bring?
Last time I brought the in-laws. Last time I brought the in-laws. This time I brought 7 Days in May.
Okay. And how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I think I'm lagging a little bit though, so that's fun. But
yeah, we'll get Boatman back here in a second when he drops and comes back. And the last one I brought was Fury, a movie, 2014 didn't see it, so we'll see how that goes. Brad Pitt war movie. So we're gonna start. Kind of got a glimpse of it. Of Moscow on the Hudson. You can take it away from where you left off of why you brought this film to us.
Yeah, no clue where I left off, but
immigration.
I think
perfect gateway.
The movie resists a lot of Robin Williams-ness that even his greatest dramas will still have. He gets to be a lot more low key, but still have humor. But just is able to give such a touching view of someone trying to kind of discover themselves outside of the culture and government that they were stuck in, and then discover themselves and their concept of what it means to find their art and find their freedom in this new American. And as I was kind of hinting at, I think there's no easy ideas about coming to America as the American dream and get those freedom. I think it's a lot more complex than that, especially on rewatches. They definitely clash at the American ideal is nice to have in your mind to have as a goal, but doesn't really exist. And I'm especially like the consistent, not really a bit, and this kind of like a real New York thing, but all these immigrants are working in like low level positions or hot dog vendors, and they're like, yeah, I'm an astrophysicist and this is what I've done. And it's like they're trying to achieve something, but it's such a hard, long road for them. And so I'll take it off to other people now.
Yeah. So I saw this movie. This was the only movie that I saw before what everybody else picked, and it didn't hit with me the first time I watched it because if you look at the poster, it looks like it's going. I without looking more into it, I thought it was going to be a lot funnier than what it was with Williams in New York. All the situation. It's more of like there's funny moments, but there's more of a drama element to it, and I really like the element of like New York City, the city like that has a ton of population that comes in from other countries because to achieve the American dreams and how it's not as easy and advertised probably in other countries or whatever, how it's easy to make it in the country. So I thought that was really interesting. Overall thoughts from everybody else in the movie. It definitely went up on me and rewatched. Did anybody see this movie prior to watching it today?
Yeah, I had seen this before. It was my experience is kind of the opposite of yours, Cody, where I really liked this on the first watch, particularly because of Robin Williams. And I think sometimes when you get a movie where the performance is just so good, when you watch it on second time, you already know that the performance is great. It kind of forces the movie to live on its own a little bit without the performance. And for me, the movie as a whole, while good, didn't fully grab me. I think the romance, is a little bit of a weaker element. It's not bad. It just kind of feels, with a lot of movies, the romance usually just kind of feels there's a romance because we need to have a romance. But there are some really good elements I like. I really like the dynamic between Williams and the security guard. I think that's really fun. I can't think of the actor's name, but it's the guy who plays Mr. Ditkovich in Spider-Man.
Elliot
he's very fun. Yeah, I think he's super fun. Some really good moments. I like the little moment towards the end with the hot dog vendor. But overall, I don't think the movie comes together as a whole, but Williams is incredible.
I think I want to agree with some of the stuff that Zach's saying about the movie's depiction of like the immigrant experience and everything, but for me the movie takes too long to get going. Like I don't think you really get to that sort of stuff until you're almost an hour in. Like there's a lot of wind up with him back home, and then he's got his cousin or his friend, whoever, that's also is the one who actually wants to defect, and then chickens out or whatever when they're actually there at the Bloomingdale's or whatever. But it didn't really get into the stuff that was interesting to me until he decides to defect. He's going to stay there, and you do have some scenes that I like a lot. Like I enjoyed the like the citizenship ceremony, right? That his girlfriend has. Like some people may know, but like half of what I do in my practice is immigration law, and so I interested in that sort of process, and getting to the point where you get your citizenship is a very long and torturous process. And so when people actually are able to achieve that, it's a very meaningful thing. And I thought that the way that the movie depicted that was to show how meaningful it is. And I also do agree with Zach that I like that the movie isn't, they're not waving the flag, right? Like, yes, you do have that scene that has some, it's meaningful. It's sentimental in a way when they're becoming American citizens, but it's more about their personal journey and why it means a lot to them as a person, more so than it is, oh, look at how fortunate they are now to be underneath the banner of the American flag. In some ways it's certainly better than where they came from, but it's not a perfect life either. Yeah, like the hot dog vendor thing is good. He's like, well, they couldn't actually let me back in my own country after what happened, of course. So here I am. I have to do this now. And I think there's good little moments in there. I agree. I don't think the romance is that great. It's just not really fully formed, in my opinion. moments, but I think my main complaint is that it took too long to get going, took too long to get to the stuff I really liked. You have this element of the romance that is a little bit. There's a lot of background noise. Sorry, coming from somebody's end, but you have this element of the romance which is a little bit half baked, but then you do like I also really like when he plays the saxophone with like the dude that he idolized and everything. I think that was a good scene too. He is getting to that's one of those moments of he is getting to achieve these things that he never thought he was able to, but there's other moments that ground it too. I think Robin Williams is good in the movie. I don't really feel one way in particular about him. I'm not anti him, I'm not super pro him, but yeah, I think it's a good example of a comedy actor mainly known for comedies giving a good dramatic performance. Obviously,
well, I think two people here liked the romance because me and Zach, I enjoyed the romantic elements of the relationship, and I think two people didn't. Brian and Kirk, how do you sit on it? Because I actually liked the dynamic between them. That's what made me like get more into the story and like the writing home and like saying like what's happening in his life, even though it's like embellishments of what's actually going on. I enjoyed that element of it, but it seemed like the other two didn't. So what's your
Maria Conchita just super charming. So
well, that's the thing. Is first of all, we get to see Maria Conchita Alonso make back-to-back appearances on the show after being for Vampire's Kiss in her last show. So she's back again. It is a weird relationship when it starts off with his face basically in her ass under her skirt. That's an interesting way to start a relationship.
I met my wife.
So I mean, I had no problem with that. I mean, it's a comedy. I mean, in that particular aspect of it, it was definitely going for the comedy, and it works. It's kind of one of those kind of things you just buy into. Was the relationship with the love story like a main plot of the movie? I don't think really. I mean, towards the end, it played some bigger parts, but it was just like one part of the story of his coming to America. For me, I had never seen this movie before. I honestly don't know how this slipped through the cracks. I just never got around to seeing it. And for me, being able to see this, a Robin Williams movie I haven't seen before, it's like getting a new Robin Williams movie because it was great. It's like something I hadn't seen before. I really didn't know anything about it beyond like the basic log line of what the movie's about. And so on that level, I really enjoyed it, especially because this is kind of my favorite Robin Williams because he gets to play plenty of comedic moments, but in what is really within a more dramatic role. It kind of reminds me of one of my favorites of his is The Fisher King, which is the same kind of thing where he gets to be goofy and stuff in certain scenes, but it really is, it's a drama. The basic story of it is drama because that's my favorite Robin Williams because when he's being just a complete clown through the movie, it can be fun, but it gets a little tiring with him doing a shtick for an entire movie. And then when he's doing straight drama, like, I don't know, like 1 Hour Photo or something, you're not getting the Robin Williams and love. So this is kind of that fine line that really is the perfect kind of movie of his for me. Other than that, it also is kind of for me, kind of a time capsule of its time because it's a very definite time in like the New York City before it got kind of cleaned up, and it's a very gritty kind of New York City. And plus, it just kind of made me feel nostalgic for the 80s just because, I mean, you got movie marquees with Flashdance and War Games are up there, and just seeing like the products in the grocery store shelves, things like that. It really just kind of brought me back to that time. So I enjoyed that level as well. I agree it started off a little bit slow. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I think what got me was that they kept the whole first, 30 minutes plus whatever that was in Russia in all subtitles, which is fine. But for a mainstream, like supposed comedy in the US, I was actually a little bit surprised by that choice. So, like normally they just have them like speaking English with Russian accents and just say, well, they're in Russia and you just kind of have to go with it. Like you understand it. So I thought that was an interesting choice. But I enjoyed this movie. I mean, it's not like my favorite Robin Williams or anything, but I liked it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Brian. I'd never seen this before. I think me and Brian are probably the only two here who can actually remember when this movie came out. And I remember seeing advertised for it, and for me, it was like the first time I had seen. Like, I'm like, oh, that's the Mork and Mindy guy doing like a serious movie. And I think World According to Garp was probably before this, right? Is that yeah? But yeah, this is the first time I remember seeing him doing anything that wasn't like a straight like broad comedy.
Popeye.
Yeah. Well, I guess too. But
another movie that rules. But yeah.
But he's but no, I think he was perfect for this role. I think he brings that kind of like charm and heart to it, where he has that range, where he has like the kindness and the gentleness, but you also see him like get fed up and he's had enough and he falls in love and has all the range of emotions there. So I think Williams is great in this because I know I'm in the minority. I don't really like straight comedy from Robin Williams at all. I'm kind of turned off by it, but when he does drama, this level of drama, I think he's fantastic. So he's really good. And I agree with Brian too. Like it has very much like that '80s Cold War America, Reagan era feel to it, where again it is it's very much of its time. Some of the stuff was a little flag wavy, which I don't mind. Like it doesn't bother me, but like the scene in the cafe where you have all the immigrants together and like they're all like reciting the Declaration of Independence and everything on 4th of July. But you also have like more realistic moments, like the scene in the grocery store stuck out to me because I have friends who have actually come from other countries who have told me like their first experience at an American grocery store and how overwhelmed they were by that. So I think that's incredibly realistic. And yeah, I just think I love how it's just like a story of like various immigrants and various immigrant stories. I like the lawyer, how he had come from Cuba and he had like, built himself up as a lawyer. Now he's helping others do. I like seeing his flashback of him first getting to the country. So I think it's like I said, it's definitely not like if you made this movie today, obviously it would be told 180 degrees different than what it is here. But I think it's still a very well told story.
Yeah, I do love the world building of that. And Scott was like Robin Williams and everything, or that made us Boatman, but everything else, like couldn't really care about. And I'm the complete opposite. I think the characters around them are so dynamic and have something different to offer to say about the immigrant experience. We get the person who really wanted to immigrate and wasn't able to make it, and that person gets stuck in that idea, which honestly is probably my favorite performance in the movie. Elliot Baskin is just like heartbreaking, and him in the window like trying to like have some sort of like gray, you made it, but like this should have been me, and that look through the window just like tears me apart. I also just like obsessed with sad clowns. That's just a constant thing I always will love. But then you get Maria Conchita Alonso is bizarrely Italian for no reason.
I was going to say they had an Italian.
She's put a lot of pepperoni on that accent too.
It served no purpose to make her Italian instead of just a Spanish immigrant or Venezuelan, whoever she is. Yeah,
I kind of get it because they didn't want her to have such a dramatic immigration. If she was from Cuba, like where she was born, her story would be a lot more impactful. Like they showed the lawyers thing, they just wanted to kind of be more like I came with my uncle and I'm trying to be a star. So I kind of get that, but I think that's very dynamic. I love there's like no white American characters throughout this whole movie. And I think there is some equating of the like immigrant experience to the Black experience in America. Even when like they show the news footage of America, it's like, I'm going to be there. It's like rebellion in the streets by the Black people. And I think there's a lot of saying like they are still have the struggle of being unwilling immigrants to go through. And that's why the equation of the family he lives with is like the same family dynamics of what he came from back in Russia, which is also a very good, interesting thing as well. And I think there's such smart world building around him.
I was going to say, I didn't think that they engaged quite enough with his friendship with Lionel. I believe is his name, except for the juxtaposition of the families was like the one thing that clearly comes across, like that's the closest thing that he finds to the family unit that he's used to back home. But I did think, at least in my opinion, they could have done more with that and sort of drawing parallels between how they are both outsiders in their own way.
I think too, Zach brought up something. My one issue with the movie, and it wasn't that bad, but when the point at when he decides to defect, to me felt kind of forced, because up till that point, it's like he's like, his friend is the one who wants to do. He's like, no, this is a mistake. I'm content where we're at. Let's stay safe. Let's not rock the boat. And then he just gets that one look at his friend, and all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm defected. I'm changing my entire life on a whim. That was the one weak part of the plot for me. I don't know if anybody else like maybe saw something there I didn't, but it felt like that just felt like I'm going to do it now. There's real no motivation for it.
I will say that's why the 55 minutes in Russia is important, because it does build up without him ever having to explicitly say I'm unhappy. You get to live in his experience and kind of understand, his grandpa kind of being constantly looked over by the Russian government and being oppressed and can't be there. His friend, constantly getting oppressed. He can't really live his love life the way he wants to. And that's once it gets juxtaposed with everything it's experienced in America, that now he can play the music he wants to. And that's why the romantic interest is so important, because he gets to love freely with her here, and like the woman that was back in Russia. So I do, he was scared, so he never says it clearly, but you definitely feel his sadness and depression during those scenes.
I kept wondering if it was because of his family that we spent so much time with, that was one of the reasons he didn't want it to affect, because he was not only going to miss them or whatever, but he was afraid for them. Like when he actually was in America and he got that letter, I thought it was gonna be some kind of bad news, something like they had been taking revenge on his family or something because of his defection, caused some kind of consequences on them. But I'm glad that didn't happen, obviously. But I was wondering if that was one of the reasons he was so hesitant to defect.
Go ahead, Bo, if you have something.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on that I think is interesting. We brought up how this is a more dramatic role for Williams, and I was looking at this because Kirk brought up Garp, and then I was thinking, well, what really, besides Mork and Mindy, did Williams do before this? This was only his fourth actual movie. He did Popeye, World According to Garp, The Survivors, and then this. So I think this is a really bold choice to make your fourth movie when you haven't even really established yourself as a comedy star. Tom Hanks took 10 years of making movies before he delved into the dramatic stuff. And then, of course, he was better at that. But I think that it's very interesting.
Well,
movie.
It was going to be a topic that I was going to bring up, because I think it's interesting when you think of a comedic actor, because the general public, when they see a Robin Williams movie, they want Dance Monkey Dance. They assume that he's going to be Doubtfire, this funny guy. So when he does this, I think it happened with Sandler with Uncut Gems. When people go see a Sandler movie or a Williams movie, they want jokes, and when it doesn't hit for them, the general public's normally a little turned off by that performance, because they are expected to Jim Carrey's and stuff like that to keep the humor going. So it's an unfair for the actor or the movie that gets into it for a general pop. That's why I think this movie may be underseen by a lot of the pop, because it doesn't have, but it was early on in his career, so it doesn't have that. But even when you go back to it, it still doesn't have that. So I think that's interesting when a comedic actor does.
And this is also, imagine if Sandler did Uncut Gems or Punch Drunk Love in the Wedding Singer era, not later in his career. That's, I think, what's really the interest, or even the same year as a Happy Gilmore or Billy Madison, because this was early. This is before he was really a superstar.
Robin Williams was never that kind of comedy actor. This is what he was always interested in. His career, if we think of his 10 most popular movies, are all comedic dramas. We can't think of super broad comedies outside of animation where he's doing his bit. I think we just conflate his stand-up persona, and he definitely implements that into a lot of the movies like Good Morning Vietnam. It'd be funny if he was doing that right with his bedtime. Good Morning Vietnam, and Dead Poet Society, that he gets he gets to speak fast and do impressions, but it's still heavily grounded in reality and drama. He has much more movies that we can say this up with than other things. I did want to say the one thing I really pinpointed and noticed what makes him such a strong dramatic actor is his greatest weapon is his smile. His smile can send 50 different messages. It can be charming and happy. It can show that kind of melancholy throughout this, and it's just a very important use of his mouth. The combination of the way his eyes work with his smile, I think, is.
Yeah, going back to his acting too. I didn't know this while I was watching the movie. Kathy was googling him. He went to Juilliard, and he was in a special program in Juilliard, an advanced program. So I kind of think this is what he always wanted. This was his plan. The stand up was, he got big off of stand up too, but it wasn't he wasn't like a Sandler who was a comedian who down the road transition to drama. Like this is what he was going to do all along.
I'm looking really at his filmography, Kirk, and it almost really looks like the opposite. Like he started out kind of doing these dramedies or even straight dramas. And then he kind of, like in the 90s, was really when he started to transition into more of the straight-up comedies, like your Mrs. Doubtfire's, your Toys.
Mrs. Doubtfire is half a straight-up comedy. It's very dramatic, and you still give it a
I think it's fair to call Mrs.
That's a
Doubtfire
comedy.
That's a comedy. The man literally is.
a lot.
It's a dramatic. There's dramatic situation that goes through his life, but that is braced in comedy throughout and through. But I think that's an interesting poke where you brought up is where it was like I think his stand-up is what made it tie into him being the funny guy, and maybe he did want to be more of a dramatic actor, but got put into these things because he was so good at what he was. So who knows?
But his public persona was much more the stand-up comedy than it was the dramatic actor.
Yeah, because his background is not even just stand-up; he's doing all those comic relief things and all.
Yeah,
he goes all into that.
But even when you saw him do an interview, he was always on. He's always doing the Robin Williams bit.
I think he probably wanted a career probably more similar, not in the same vein, but John Travolta. Someone who started as a goofy TV comedy guy and then was kind of able to, go more into these more dramatic type things. Obviously, a better career than John Travolta, but still.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you for bringing it. Zach, what's your rating on Muscala on the Hudson?
What is this out of 5? 4.5.
Letterbox. What's your letterbox?
4.5 out of 5.
Okay. Scott.
I gave it 3 stars. There's definitely good stuff in the second half. Just, a little bit of filler in there too.
Brian.
3.5.
Okay. Kirk.
3.5.
Okay. Boatman.
I'm an original 3.5.
Okay. And I went from 3.5 to 4. I really enjoyed it on the second viewing.
I did the exact opposite.
You had it at 4, and I looked at that prior, but that works. But I'm glad you brought it up. I kind of dreaded when you brought it up because I was like, didn't really love this movie the first time, but it turned out it was the surprise of the week for me. Okay, Girlfriends. Tell us about it, Scott.
Yeah, so it was not a first time watch for me, but I had my first time watch of this movie this year in February. I don't even remember exactly how I came across it, but I saw people referring to this as like a 70s version of Frances Ha, which obviously, as people know, is one of my favorite movies. And so I knew I had to check it out. Loved it on the first watch. Have been thinking about it ever since watching it. Have been thinking about watching it again ever since seeing it for the first time. And so I wanted to bring it here because I know, obviously, there's some people on this call who have different thoughts about Frances Ha, but a lot of people in the community love that movie. And so I felt like this would be an interesting one to introduce people to. It is eerily similar to Frances Ha in like some of the plot beats and the themes of the movie, like so much so that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach like had to be inspired by this movie heavily when they made Frances Ha. But yeah, it's basically about a woman in her 20s in New York City who is living with her close friend. Her close friend moves out because she's going to get married, and it ends up being about the main character, Susan. Melanie Myron plays her, and sort of her trying to figure out how to go on her own, living on her own, pursuing her art. She's a photographer. She wants to be a photographer, and just making her way in the chaotic place it is, New York City. I absolutely love the film. Both times I've watched it now. I think it's really, really perceptive about this time in someone's life. And in particular, I really love how it affirms that being alone, it's okay to be alone at this time in your life. And it can be strangely powerful to be alone because, again, you think of the traditional notion of success, right, is what her friend achieves in this movie, right? She moves out, she gets married, she has a child. But by the end of the movie, we realize that she actually is envious of Susan's life in a lot of ways. Susan being the one who, again, does not necessarily have these traditional markers of success. She's struggling to get by. She's struggling with her job. She's struggling in her love life, but she has that solitude that she can come home to every night and close the door. And she begins, although initially she can't really understand how to deal with that, like she invites this other person in. She eventually learns to like appreciate the power that can have. And again, the movie ends up in a place, I think it pretty similar to Frances Ha, actually, again, where they like have had this moment of coming together again, and her friend is like, yeah, kind of envious of her lifestyle, and they're able to sort of make up. But at the end of the movie, it's not like we're ever going to go back to how it was. It's like we have learned to appreciate each other's lifestyles and who the other person is, and the fact that now that we're older, we're just not going to be in each other's lives the way that we once were, and that's okay. So it has a lot of truth in there. Again, for me, at the point where I am in my life, I've been living on my own for several years now, and I have learned to really appreciate a lot of things about it. It just hit home for me at the right time. So I'm interested to know what other people thought of it, because I think it definitely paved the way for a lot of movies that I love.
Listen, I don't want to yuck your yum like at all. Like, listen, I was sitting there the entire time to figure out what this movie reminded me of and why. And as soon as you said those two words, Frances Ha, like everything in my world just got unlocked. And I tried with that movie. A lot of people told me I wouldn't like it. They were correct. This movie, I was struggling to get the characters at times struggling. I was struggling. The runtime is very short, but I felt like this movie could have been. It felt so much longer for me. Like I couldn't connect to any of the characters. I couldn't connect to the story. It was a rough for me, and I don't want to yuck anybody. Like, if you liked it, go for it. I'm not going to talk much on Girlfriends today, but I went in there with the best of intentions, and I came out not feeling great overall. I'll open the floor. If you guys liked it, talk. If you feel like me and you want to butt out early, let me know. If you don't, enjoy the conversation. Obviously.
I'm going to take that invitation. No, because I think some of the people
I'm not shocked.
more,
I'm not
like
shocked.
And like you, I'm not going to have a lot to say on it, and I would like to, kind of get out of the way and let people that enjoyed it more to talk about it. I can see the comparisons to Frances Ha, which I did not love. I thought it was kind of boring, but that's just my thing. But I will say I thought Frances Ha, though, especially with Greta Gerwig, you had a lot more personality, and I like the characters in that one a lot more. This one, not so much. It definitely felt like the longest movie I watched this week, even though it was one of the shortest. The weird thing is, as far as identifying the characters, I come at this looking at it from the side of her friend who got married, because like I know when I got married and when I had kids, like all my friends kind of felt like abandoned, and like, oh, you don't have as much time for me anymore, and we can't do these things anymore, and you have all these other commitments, and I'm here, like I'm working, I got 2 small kids, whatever. And so I kind of was looking at this story from the other side of that as far as my personal life. And so that was a little kind of the opposite of where you're really supposed to be watching this movie from.
Well, no, I think that is definitely part of it. Sorry if I can interject. I definitely think that is part of it. Again, I don't mean to suggest that there is necessarily a right side or wrong side in all of this.
Right or wrong.
It's just that, again, you think of the person that you're describing, the person that you are, as being like, oh, this is the traditional markers of success. You don't think of the main character in that way. And so the fact that they kind of go out of their way to show, well, actually, this lifestyle has its own perks too, and the friend is in some ways envious of that too. But yes, obviously the other side of it is what you're saying about
so I mean, I did identify with and I kind of appreciated some parts of the movie based on that. I don't know, the main character I kind of would never really get into. I found her a little bit annoying. I think the relationship with the rabbi was creepy. I mean, even if she's of age, it's still creepy as hell with what's going on with that thing. Even though I do like seeing Eli Wallach pop up, though. I don't get to see him in a lot of stuff, so I like watching him pop up and stuff. And then the tone of the movie I thought was a little bit strange. It's like a drama. It's like, I mean, there's lots of things with drama. Like just Moscow and the Hudson we were talking about. It's kind of a drama and a comedy together. And this kind of had that same thing, but even like within a scene, like the one that jumped to mind is like, towards the end where she's talking with her friend and she's like, I had an abortion this morning. So how was your show? And I'm like, this is just a weird, like sudden transition. It's like, you want to just skip over that abortion thing. And it's just a little weird to me, but yeah, I mean, I didn't hate the movie, but this is, as no surprise to anyone, it's just one that wasn't for me. And now I will let other people talk.
Take it away, guys.
I enjoyed the movie. I'm a big Frances Ha fan, so again, I think your mileage is going to be pretty much the same there. Yeah, I like just the idea of this character struggling with being lonely, but also wanting to be alone. I thought that was just a really cool dynamic where, she's struggling with, just being on her own and figure things out. And she needs other people, and she recognizes that. But also at her core, she just at this point in her life doesn't want that burden, wants to be on her and do her own thing. And she has, relationships she goes in and out of, but you could tell her main thing is being alone. And like Scott said, I like the fact that there's no like right answer as to how, you live your life. And that's my thing. It's like, I got married young. I have friends my age who are still single.
Brag.
And it's like, but it's like, no, it's like we both made the right choices for ourselves. If I would have done what they did, I'd be miserable. If they had done what I did, they'd be miserable. Everybody's different. Everybody's life choices should be different. There's no right way to live your life. And I like how this movie shows that the good and the bad, the ups and the downs of both ways of it. As far as the character goes, I really liked her. Like, I just thought she was a very unique. I like that really like, that young 70s Jewish New Yorker thing really worked for me. I thought she was just like Frances Ha, Greta Gerwig in that movie. She's just very magnetic. Even when things aren't going great for her, she still seems to have like that energy and that positivity that she keeps going and like makes you want to keep watching. So I really enjoyed her. I like the comedy. I liked how it was just like little things dropped in. Like when the scene I remember is when towards the end when she's planning her gallery expo, and she's talking to the owner of the gallery and her assistant. They're both in neck braces. They just both have comically large neck braces on, and they never address it.
Yeah.
They never talk about it, and that was hilarious to me. Just little things like that throughout the movie. So I like the style of it too. So I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah,
as far as
sorry, yeah, I actually like this more than Frances Ha because I think, for one, I just think the main actress is a better actress than Greta Gerwig. I think Greta Gerwig struggles sometimes.
Take him out. Take him out.
I think she can be very good. But I think she struggles. I think you can always kind of tell she's
a crazy statement. Crazy.
I don't think that's a crazy statement to make. I don't.
No, I just think that you think this girl in the main thing is a great actress because I think they could both be on the same line. Personally,
it's a crazy statement to make in front of me and Scott.
Yeah, I think she's better. I think
I'm glad you like.
Yeah, I like Frances Ha a lot. But I think that I think this main character just fits a little bit more into my vibe and what I like for characters, which I know is a lot of things that people find annoying. But I really like this main character, and I think that. To kind of address that Eli Walt thing, I think the movie thinks it's creepy. I think the movie thinks that the dynamic is creepy, and that's why it ends up going the way that it does. But I also think Eli Wallach's great. The person who I want to shout out, though, it's not even really that big of a part. But Bob Balaban is one of those guys who just makes every movie better. He just makes every movie better. He plays Susan's husband, and I just really like him, and I love the little moments where she does not like me. I think Babylon's just one of those guys who just improves every movie for me. But yeah, no, I think to kind of piggyback off what Kirk was saying, I think that this movie is essentially about how there's satisfaction and dissatisfaction in all walks of life. And that's kind of the point, is that both of them are simultaneously happy and unhappy. And I think it's kind of about the contradictions of whichever life you choose, that there's going to be things like Kirk said, you want to be alone, but you don't want to be alone. And I think that's Very interesting. And in Susan's case, she wants to be with someone, but does she really? Like, it's in both cases, it's just filled with contradictions. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. This was very up my alley. So thank you, Scott.
I think I viewed it much more about the dissatisfaction. I feel like there's a very like grass is always greener on the other side, and it's where you need to accept your own path and be happy with where your life is going. Because then you have Anne who went the life of marriage, but then she's just constantly like upset she can't be the artist. She can't jealous. Yeah. She's jealous of what Susan's able to do, and that's her kind of breakdown, near the end of the movie. And then you have Susan still also, not fully satisfied with her career and her love life. And that's, I think, her going with the rabbi is kind of rebellion. It's just like, you're going to get married. I'm just going to like show my youth in your face and like fuck around and do crazy things. But still kind of, it's not really jealous of her marriage, but jealous of her being taken away from her. That was like her marriage in her mind. And so that inability to adjust and evolve and do kind of get over it. Movies about like evolutions of friendships always hit me real strong. Yeah, I was very much lived my best life in college, and it was a really hard time for me to kind of get over how those friendships evolved and changed, and they weren't all going to be the same that they were at that point. And that's what the movie is. It starts off in the prime of their friendship, and it is inevitable that it can't stay the same. And that's the big theme with through life. Nothing can stay the same. Everything evolves, and we just instead of being dissatisfied and upset and looking at what other people have that we don't have, we just need to accept the road that it goes. As far as an actor, I'm going to point out Christopher Guest, I think is so funny. Mainly, is like the most I laughed at anything on any of these movies is him just saying, "Do you want to dance?" And like a little joke. It is him putting a little bit of Christopher Guestisms into it.
Don't you love like the men are all football watching pigs element of the movie, right? Which is, she goes to Eli Wallach's house to go out to lunch with him, but then no, he's all of a sudden he got tickets to the football game. And then later she wants to go to Anne's house with Christopher Guest, and he's like, no, actually I want to watch this football game instead. I just like it. Weird vendetta against football in this movie, but you know what? Fair enough.
To go back to the Christopher Guest scene, and I think this is a through line throughout the whole movie. I love all the interactions where somebody asks the main character something, and they say, in that specific Christopher Guest action, like, "Do you want to go home?" "No." You want to go to your house?" "Yes." Like, just those. Again, I think this is a movie that lives in contradiction, where characters will say no to something that they really want to do, and then they'll do it later. And I think that's an interesting dynamic in this movie.
Well, I think that was fighting against her being like more of a progressive female and the world around her not being ready. And that was the way for Christopher Guest's character to kind of take the power back to like, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to ask you the same thing because it should come from me. And that's how the dynamics work.
Well, that's one of the other parts of her arc, I think, is that in the first part of the movie, she's kind of just like letting life happen to her. But then, when Anne moves out, when she's on her own, it's like, no, actually, you have to have some sort of active role in doing what you want, like in getting what you ultimately want if you're going to do that. So like she has to go to the one photographer's office and like basically sort of negotiate her way back there into his office. So that she can eventually find the person who helps her out, and she has to actually be the person who says, you know what, to the other roommate that happens. She has to be like, you know what, this isn't working out. I need you to move out right now. Like she takes the active role there. And then again at the end with Christopher Guest, like just really wants her to move in, and she's like, you know what? No, I don't. I want to keep my own place. Like I like having my own place. It's important to me that I have this, kind of safe haven for me. So it's also about like, again, she's, it's a coming of age movie in a way. It's also about like adulting and having to make your own decisions for yourself, so that you can achieve something close to the life that you want, because it's not just going to be dropped in your lap. It's not just going to happen to you. You have to go out and seize it.
Yeah, and the new roommate was another way of her just like refusing to move on. She's like, I'm just gonna reduplicate this. I'm gonna get a new Anne and get her in there, and then her having to take the power that it's not gonna be the same. I have to make changes. Yeah, it's a big part of that. Also, it's point you talked about some of the great lines, and I think it's so smartly written. And I wonder if we lived in a world where the 70s was a little more progressive, that Claudio Wheels, because the movie that I thought about other than Francis Ha was Annie Hall a lot, and I was like, Claudia Wheels like could have been a Woody Allen type if it was a different world at that point, and women writers and directors got more work.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems like you guys loved it. I'm excited for you. We're gonna go to Scott first. What's your rating?
It's 5 stars. I absolutely love this movie. It's going to be in my top 100.
We'll go positive round. Boatman, what's your rating?
4.5.
Kirk?
Probably landed a 4 for me.
Zach?
9 out of 10. 4.5.
1.5. Brian?
For me, yeah, 1.5.
Yeah, half star. Francis Ha was a half star better, just for anybody keeping track at home.
Because Greta Gerwig's a great actress.
Whatever you want to say. I think both of these could be lost in time. Okay. All right. So we are going to the middle of the show. We are going to Dave Made a Maze. Brian, tell us about it.
Yeah, so Dave Made a Maze is a little film, came out in 2017, starring really no actors you really know, except we had Nick Thune, apparently a stand-up comedian. I've never seen him, in the lead role of Dave. It's got the bass player from OK Go, plays his friend Gordon, and then a bunch of actors and actresses you don't know. This is a movie that I don't even know if it got theatrical release. If it did, it obviously didn't appear anywhere near me. But I had heard about it, and somebody recommended I check it out, and I did, and I just loved everything for how completely original it was. This movie is basically like the world's coolest art installation that I would love to walk through. If this was set up as a museum or something, this would be so much fun to walk through. For anyone out there who has not seen the movie, which is most of you, basically this guy builds like this little cardboard box, like fort or whatever maze in his apartment building. And then he gets lost inside it. And so his girlfriend and his friends decide to go in and, try and help find him. Of course, once you get inside, as he says, it looks much bigger on the inside. This whole gigantic, a maze, or as they call it, it's not a maze, it's a labyrinth inside this world. And it's like every single room is like just some different take on like this labyrinth, but everything in it is made of cardboard. Everything in it is made of paper and construction, and it's just the coolest looking art thing. I mean, even when things get attacked, there's like little origami birds. The blood is all made of like confetti or silly string. So I mean, it's obviously not meant to be taken seriously. It's just a comedy. It's supposed to be surreal. It's supposed to be just something very different. And on that level, I think it is a 100% success. It is the most unique movie I have seen in a long time. It is super creative. It's even just from room to room. I mean, they have like one room, it's all about like forced perspective, where people are walking around the room. You can see like there's like a little cup up here and a big chair back there, and it's really cool. At one point, they are all turned into paper bag puppets, which I have not seen since I was a kid, so that was kind of cool to remind me of that. Yeah, this is just a movie I wanted to bring it here and let people watch it because I wanted to bring something different. I'd done the whole, here's some old 80s, 90s movies that I love that you guys haven't seen. I've done that many times. So this time I wanted to bring something that's A, newer, and B, just very different. And I'm very curious to see how you are all going to react to this movie.
So I think this, to do a blanket statement, I think this is where like concept versus quality of film is like where the bar's lined, right? Because if you want to talk about like one of the most unique movies I've seen, probably this one's going to be up there because I've never seen a movie like this, the way they take it, everything else. But the world they create, I hate. I hate when you said that person was a comedian. I said, that dude's funny, because in this movie
I've never seen him, so I can't attest to that.
Yeah. But I was like, this movie, you can't tell he's funny. I think all the cast, like everybody, I hated every person in this movie, like in the casted role, like in the world created, awesome. Like that's great. I just maybe wish it was in better hands, like of like casting and more budget. I don't know, but like I was just like, I
feel like the movie would have been ruined if it went big budget.
Right, you are 100% correct.
Yes.
I think that is true, but I also like couldn't get it out of my head. Like when the girlfriend shows up and they're all the cardboard, my ass is kicking that thing over in about 3 seconds. Like, you are a grown ass man. Get out of the boxes, you child. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll listen to you." And then everybody comes over. They're like, "Just call your friends." Like, that woman's leaving this relationship in a second. There's no way she stays. So that's where it's just like, that's where the ridiculousness is, and it just keeps going. But again, when they're in that world and what they create is interesting. It's just the people telling me the story I couldn't stand. So overall, like, thoughts. Did anybody see this movie prior? I'm just curious about that. Okay, everybody first watch. Okay, go ahead, bro.
The thing that this movie really reminded me of is, and I don't know if anybody's seen the show, so this might mean nothing, but this reminded me of one of those high concept episodes of Community, like the paintball episodes, or one of those episodes where you put these characters in a situation where there's stakes, but it's clearly goofy and there's supposed to be a lot of fun. And I think the main difference for me, and because the whole time I was asking myself, I should love this. Why am I not loving it? And I realized for me, it's the characters. I don't really care about these characters all that much. So I don't really care about what's actually going on, the comedic aspects or the stakes of the story, which they are, of course, farcical. So the stakes aren't really all that there, and that's okay. But again, I don't think these characters, none of the characters are bad per se, but they're not developed enough to where I really care about them, and I just don't think that makes the humor or the comedy work. I will say, I got really excited when the guy from OK Go showed up, which is actually funny that he's in this, because if you're familiar with OK Go, their main thing is like these really inventive, creative music videos.
I was going to say the same thing. This is the most OK Go music video ass movie. So
yeah, it feels very similar to that. And the other thing I was thinking about is that this movie actually feels very similar to Dave's Maze itself. It is unbridled creativity, just complete, uncontrolled creativity that maybe should have been reined in a little bit and wasn't exactly thoroughly thought through. But at the same time, it's hard not to admire the things that it was able to accomplish with such, low budget and low materials.
Yeah. The thing about OK Go music videos is that most of them are 4 or 5 minutes long. And when you stretch it out to a feature-length film, it starts to feel a little thin, and that's definitely how I felt about this. Thin in a lot of departments. It did honestly just feel like a stunt movie. Like, let's see if we can pull this off. Not really going to give much thought to the story or characters. I'm not somebody who gravitates toward fantasy stuff anyway. Even something like as big and epic as Lord of the Rings, I have never gotten into. So when you strip it down like this, and it's like, oh, it's a cardboard minotaur or whatever, and like you said, I can't think of what it is, but the blood is, instead of blood, it's like streamers or whatever that's coming out of them. It's a brand of quirky that is just not for me. It is like kind of, I don't know if twee is quite the right word, but it does kind of have that feel to it a little bit. But I didn't really find it that funny. It is creative, sure, and I appreciate that element of it. I suppose like it would have been much worse if it was also not creative in the concept and execution of that, but it just doesn't really go any deeper to me than, that it was an interesting experiment. I think they just didn't really have enough there for a feature film. That's probably one of the reasons it clocks out at 75 minutes or whatever without the credits. Although I guess we're going to talk about another 70-something minute movie in a second that has a ridiculous amount of stuff in it, but the opposite. But yeah, just not really my sort of thing. I mean, I like to think I can be open-minded about all this stuff. Zach, I believe, said that I was going to hate this after he watched it. He told me that he thought I was going to hate it. I didn't hate it, but it's not for me.
And I liked it quite a bit. I had a lot of fun with it. I think just enjoying it purely as a creative experiment. And I think, I have plenty of Legos in the back, and I'm a Lego builder, so I am attracted to the idea of child's play being advanced upon as an adult. And these are like some like kid ideas and crafts and making your own house. And like, but we can really like make fucking awesome shit and make a movie about it. As we're adults and have more resources at our hands. And I think this is like top tier level production design for people with no money. They did amazing things for their to do. It is thin, and I think it would have benefited by accepting its thinness more. I think trying to force some dramatic subplot and of him feeling lost and their romance being lost, it didn't really matter to the movie, and it was very half-baked. I think if they just accepted it's this guy getting lost in the maze and we're just going to have it be an adventure and a comedy, it would benefit more. You don't need to have stakes and drama. I think that's
they try to put in this whole metaphor of how he's never finished anything. That's like the maze, he's lost, he can't find the way out. But it's like you said, I think most people, including myself, just enjoyed it as just what it is.
I'm more on like Zach's page. I think Brian here. I liked it. First of all, I love the fact that it was basically like, hey, we have no money. We want to make a fantasy movie. How do we do it? Let's make literally everything out of cardboard.
And they didn't pay for any of the cardboard. There's some lighting company near them. They let them have all their cardboard for free, and they used it all. And they would just make like 2 rooms at a time. And then when they were done, they put it all right back in the recycle bin to make sure it got recycled.
See, that's awesome. I just love that. Just that's like such a great use of creative use of a low budget and kind of using the budget to your advantage. I really liked it. I love the labyrinth, and I think that was the thing. I didn't mind. I mean, the characters were there. They were, I thought they were at least mildly entertaining, but it wasn't about them. It was about the labyrinth. It was about the creativity there. And it was about him, like I think Brian just said, the metaphor of him, completing something and finishing something. I kind of like the fact that there wasn't too much focus on the characters. Like, Cody, you brought up the relationship and the girlfriend. When it's first started, I'm like, oh, this is just going to be about him, and the girlfriend's upset because he's a loser and he has to prove himself to the girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. That's going to be the whole movie. And it wasn't. Like, I was very surprised with the fact that she basically kind of sticks by him through the whole thing. It's like kind of like believes in what he's doing. And I like that.
She is dumb.
It's it's not real life here. What we're dealing with. It's kind of like a surreal situation.
You don't think that some women come home to their husbands and they're playing in in boxes? Yeah, I'm telling you,
those women aren't in the movie. Legos. They're not in the movie though. But no, but I like there is one scene towards the end that bogs me down, where that bogged it down for me. Like there's a scene between the two of them, and they keep like changing form and represents what we're talking about. And I'm like, that's what I was worried the whole movie was going to be about. And that was my least favorite scene in the movie.
I will agree with that.
And I think the fact that it was about like, okay, we're not going to bog it down with their interpersonal relationships, the problems, and the maze solving all their problems for them. It's just about the labyrinth and all the cool stuff in the labyrinth. I love the design. I love the look of the Minotaur. I love how he had the cardboard hand. I thought that looked so cool. Just the different looks. Because that's the thing, like, it's a cardboard maze, but everywhere they went looks so different and so unique where it never got boring or dull. So yeah, I'm very thumbs up on this movie.
My familiarity with Nick Thune came mainly from Comedy Bang Bang, which he's appeared on a number of times, and I know James Urbaniak's kind of connected to who plays the documentarian to that kind of community a little bit, and I think it just it opened me. I'm very familiar with that, like the LA comedy scene and the like Groundlings and UCB and stuff. And I don't think any of them were really UCB people, but it just like reeked of that kind of energy for me, which I just find kind of endlessly fun. That kind of just playing off each other and everybody's own creative, goofy ideas coming into play. Like I could easily see Scott Aukerman being a part of this movie. It seems like something they would just make. It's very like web series elements to it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, you were like the Labyrinth, but it's like all these people that are in this stuff, I just don't care what happens to them, and I know if it's cool, just what happens with the Labyrinth, but they're like making me.
That's because you hate people.
I mean, true. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not a big fan of the human race, but and this movie didn't help with it. Honestly, like these idiots decided to get into boxes created by this guy that never finishes anything. Sounds like a terrible idea, but he's in there. So, but if anything, like of movies like this, like I don't love, but overall, like it's interesting to see what they were able to create with such little budget, and it kept my attention the entire time. Like at the end of the day, like no offense to Girlfriends, that lost my attention throughout. This movie, it was ridiculous and stupid, but I wasn't like checking. I was like, what else are we gonna fucking do in this movie? Let's see something else. Like, cool. Their courses are Minotaur in this movie. Why wouldn't there be one? So yeah, I think
it was him all along.
Yeah, cool, interesting. All right, Brian, what's your score on Dave Built a Man?
4 stars.
4 stars. Okay. Kirk.
I'll get a real solid 3.5.
Boatman.
I'm going back and forth between 3.5. For right now, I'm going to say 3.
Okay. Zach.
3.5. 7 out of 10.
Okay. I knew you were just going to throw the 7 out of 10 out there. Scott.
2 stars. It's just not my sort of thing.
And I'm giving it 2.5. It is what it is. I'm glad I saw it. I don't think I will revisit it. That's 2 of those movies I won't revisit. Next up, Primer. Kirk, why'd you bring Primer?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's interesting. I'd never seen Dave Made a Maze before, when I had no idea what it was when I picked this, but there seem to be a lot of similarities between those 2 movies where it's just super low budget, and it's about a young guy who just makes something, or young people who just make something that's really weird and kind of fancy, off the wall, and you just kind of have the movie just says, yeah, this exists, deal with it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But no, I wanted to rewatch Primer because I haven't seen it in a while, and I wanted to rewatch it. And it's a movie that you have to, watch multiple times. It just begs you to do that because of, it just throws so much at you. And if you know anything about me, one of my least favorite things in movies is exposition. I hate when movies spoon feed you all the information you need to know to keep up. And this movie does the exact opposite. It just throws you in the deep end and says, do what you can with it. It's about this group of initially 4 guys, but eventually it focuses on 2. These 4 guys who are working on a tech startup in their garage, in one guy's garage. They're working on some kind of device. I don't even know what they're trying to do, but they accidentally invent a time machine. And it's a very bare bones time machine. There's nothing like flashy Back to the Future to it. It's just this ugly box that, for some reason, works where they can travel back in time. And again, I think that going back to Dave Made a Maze is a very good use of hey, we want to do a big sci-fi movie, a big sci-fi concept, but we only have, I think the budget of this movie is like $7,000. How do we do that? And I think they made awesome use of that just by making it so bare bones and so mundane. So anyway, these guys discover time travel, and they start going back. And their goal is, okay, we're going to day trade. Because they can only the box initially can only go back like 6 hours. So we're going to day trade. We're at the end of the day, we're going to call our broker and see what the biggest stock of the day was. We're going to go back in time, and we're going to invest in that and start making some money. So they start doing that, but it starts of course getting out of hand. It's the 2 guys who kind of own the business, or the ones who take it over. They push the other 2 guys out, and they start doing this, but then they kind of start working against each other. Characters just start showing up. You're not sure, what time they're from or what time frame or how they got back in time or forward in time. So it's just a really cool movie. Scott alluded to this. There's a lot of technobabble. They throw a ton of stuff at you that if you know anything about science or physics, what they're saying may make sense to you. I have no idea. It's completely over my head. But I think the film is made in such a way where it's kept interesting. The camera keeps moving, locations change. There's a lot of business going on visually that keeps you engaged and keeps you interested. And like I said, it's a movie where once you watch, you're like, okay, I got to go back and rewatch that again. There's a whole lore. If you go online, you can see. When you Google this, the first thing on the Wikipedia page is a graphic of the time machine and how it works. And, it's a very interesting concept for the way time travel, if it was going to work in the real world, how it would. So I think it's a really fun movie. It's very interesting to watch. And again, like I said, I like the idea of, having to keep up, having to go back and rewatch it, find new things. I love that kind of movie. It is very short. It's under 80 minutes. So yeah, that's why I brought it to the table.
So I'm gonna open up to the field. If you said you hate exposition, I hate when I have to watch a movie multiple times to gather things, which we can talk about more about this. Like, that drives me absolutely nutty. But I'll open it up because I always take the main field. Everybody overall, anybody see this movie prior to this? So thoughts on this, the rewatch, I guess.
This was a movie that I saw like when I was like 15 or 16. This was like when I was first really getting into movies. And for those who don't know, the movie that made me love movies was Inception. So for a while, I was going more after like the big like puzzle movies that were a little bit more confusing and, just had a lot going on and were a little bit more harder to figure out. And this was one that I remember really liking at the time and being like, I want to go back to this so I can figure it out. And then I never did that. So now I finally got to do that. And I still had no idea how to figure out, probably because it had been so long since I watched it. That being said, I like it. I liked it a little less than I did when I first saw it, but I do like it. I think the thing that I really like about this movie is how like naturalistic the dialogue feels. I really like this dialogue of the characters kind of talking over each other and interrupting each other. It's almost mumblecore, but not to the point where it feels like obnoxiously mumblecore like a lot of mumblecore does.
It's like if Robert Altman did mumblecore.
Yes, that's great. Actually, I think that's a great analogy. But yeah, and I think, like you said, I really like the way this time travel works, and I like these two characters. Actually, I think these two characters make me care about. I like how Aaron is more of like, we need to go big with this, and Abe is much more like, hold on. And I think that dynamic is very interesting. The one thing I will hit on this movie, though, is that this is a 77-minute movie. It takes 25 minutes for the actual time travel to happen. That's about a third of the movie before the actual time travel happens, and we're just doing the techno stuff. I think if this was like a 2-hour movie, I'd be fine with that 20 minutes and stuff. In this movie, that's a problem that we're not getting off the ground that quickly.
Yeah, I think it does take you a while to get into it, which, like Kirk said, he likes when you throw them right into a world. They don't have to explain everything to you, which I like that in movies too. But usually when you're thrown into this world, like you're thrown into the middle and things are happening. Here you're thrown in and there's just people talking technobabble for half an hour, and you're just like, I have no clue what's going on. I don't understand anything they're talking about. I don't know where this is going. It is very slow. It felt far longer than its runtime. I didn't dislike the movie necessarily. It just, I know Kirk said this is the kind of movie that begs to be watched more than once, and I can totally see that. But having only watched this once, I can only evaluate it on my one-time viewing, which is that I'm fucking clueless. And I finished this movie and went straight to Wikipedia to try to figure out what happened in this movie. And first thing I saw was a flow chart, and I'm like, I don't even care enough to read that flow chart, and I read right past it. And it's the kind of thing where I do respect its ambition. what they're trying to do. I like the style of it, like you said, it's kind of that very naturalistic thing, which was in late 90s, early 2000s was very much the style of independent films, whether it be this or Swingers or a lot of other movies. Even I know Boatman just recently watched In the Company of Men. It's kind of the same thing. It's just a lot of dialogue and heavy. It's kind of talky movie. But this is one that I think if I watched it again and understood more of it, I think I would appreciate it more. But having watched just once, I was largely confused. And I consider myself an intelligent person. And I love good time travel or time loop movies. I'm a sucker for those things. But this is just one that it kind of hurt my brain to watch. Two other things. One, I thought it was weird how they just kind of almost as an afterthought had this whole situation with the gun in the party and that whole event that they were going to try to prevent or whatever. It's like it seemed like that would be a big deal, and it's kind of like an afterthought in the movie.
It isn't the point that like that's the one guy's plan. The director Shane Carruth, whatever, that's his character. I think that's Aaron. Maybe he that the whole time that's what he's trying to do is go back and multiple times redo this scenario so that he can be like the hero or whatever.
Right? But the actual resolution of what he does, they seem like it's just like a little 30-second wrap up. You're like, oh, I guess.
Well, you don't really know. You don't really know. That's the thing. They leave you in the dark about how exactly did this go down. But the point is, he kind of messed everything up because he kept going back to the start of this day to try and do this multiple times, and it led to multiple them interacting in the phone calls and all that. It's very complicated. But
and the last thing I will say is just like I was talking earlier about nostalgia because of Moscow and Hudson. Seeing that Weeble Wobble just took me back like flashbacks to my childhood. Just saying.
This movie took me like over 2 hours to watch, despite being 70-something minutes. So I feel like I watched it twice just by watching it once because I was just going back over it to try and figure out. I think, like, in general, I agree with Kirk that like too much exposition is a bad thing, but I think there's a needle that you have to thread sometimes. And Boatman brings up Inception. Inception's a movie that often gets dogged on for having clunky exposition, and Elliot Page saying, "Oh, whose dream are we in now?" or whatever. Whose subconscious are we in now? But my opinion on that and on like Tenet and other stuff has always been like, I mean, would you rather they not explain it to you? Because it's just not going to create a good experience, a good viewing experience. And at the end of the day, you are still making a movie for an audience to understand. And sometimes the movie gets it right. Sometimes it, again, I don't feel like I should have to be watching the movie, taking 2 hours to watch the 70-something minute movie. I think there has to be more of a path. And like, again, I got to the end after watching it, and I do feel like I understood most of it, but it took a lot of effort to get there. And more importantly, when I did get to the end and I felt like I understood everything, I was like, I don't know that this was really worth the effort. Like, I liked it overall because there is something satisfying, right, about putting that puzzle together. And when like you do finally understand, like, okay, here's what this means, and the pieces are clicking together in your head. Like, there is something satisfying about that, and I don't like take that lightly. But again, when I do understand everything, I'm like, okay, so like they kind of ruined their friendship over this time travel thing, and also this guy, saved the day by stopping the gunmen or whatever. Like, what does it mean? Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, it just didn't add up to a whole lot for me. So I guess it's somewhat similar to Dave Made a Maze. Like, again, it was a concept that just ended up feeling a little thin on anything else. But I liked it more than that, just because it didn't have all the quirkiness or whatever that I didn't really like. Like, I did enjoy it overall, just kind of like it just didn't kick into that next gear that I wanted.
Scott, I just ask you, when you say it took you that long to watch it, was it because you were like pausing and rewinding, or were you
yes,
just walk away?
Yeah.
Okay.
And trying to figure out, which version of Abe or Aaron is this, which,
Zach is about to have a panic attack if you don't let it. So that man is seething to just talk. So let Zach talk. Zach, he's pacing back.
I need to stop being polite and letting other people go before me.
Don't be pacing.
thought this movie was extremely arrogant. And going on to Scott's thoughts, the kind of puzzle this is like the jigsaw puzzle that exists. There's just off-white color pieces, and it's really hard and challenging. And sure, you can be satisfied when you're done, but when you're done, you just got a blank white fucking picture, like nothing to really be pleased by or to feel like you accomplished something beautiful. Because it amounts to nothing. It's just trying to look how smart we are by putting this technical bullshit together. And the reason we're all confused is not because of the lack of exposition of the technical jargon. It's because they're not speaking technical jargon. They're speaking nothing. They are literally speaking in vague sentences and saying nothing. They speak the whole movie. So the point of not having exposition is to get into the action. But instead, they fill it up with filler of nonsense talking. I did pull up some dialogue I wanted to read. No one would say that what they were doing was complicated. It wouldn't even be considered new, except for maybe in the geological sense. They took from their surroundings what was needed and made it something more. There's literally nothing being said in that sentence. They say the word something.
The voiceover
at least
is rough,
100.
yeah.
Something and anything are said 100 times throughout the movie, which is place of not using a noun that they could just use instead.
Okay. Brian said that he considers himself a smart person. I'm not. I'm dumb as shit. Okay, be honest with you. I'm barely here. I'm barely in the show. This movie drove me absolutely fucking crazy. And I will say, I find it funny, and this is not an attack of Kirk. Kirk brought this movie, but when he thought Before Sunset, where two people just chatting in or whatever, and thought was they're so arrogant and so up his own ass, this movie's all the way up its own ass for the entire time for me. They're talking about a bunch of shit, and they don't tell me anything what I'm supposed to know, and I felt lost, but I said, damn it, I'm not rewinding, I'm not pausing, I'm not doing anything. You're just going to have to tell me what this movie is, or I'm not going to get it, and apparently I didn't get it, because I was still so lost and so confused at the end of this movie. And I get it. I hear that all the time, exposition annoys people, and forced exposition is really annoying. I'm with Scott. There's got to be a middle ground. I don't care if you have to put it on a napkin, put it on the back of a fridge. No one has to speak it, no one has to say it, but tell me what I'm looking at and what I'm supposed to be understanding from this movie, because I couldn't engage into it. And Boatman's I love the talking over it, and stuff. And I was that if anybody knows me, that drives me fucking batty when people talk over each other. No wonder Boatman likes it. But I'm sitting there just wanting to rip the remaining parts of my hair out, because it doesn't tell me where we're going and what. And then at the end, I'm just well, that's an alarm that I didn't mean to set. And that's where we're at. So that's my take on it. Again, Kirk, I think it's interesting for the time. I think there's a lot of indie kind of movies that we brought today, for a few people that have brought onto the show. This one I don't want to make it rewatch it to pick up the things I missed, because it pissed me off on the initial watch.
That's fair. If you didn't like it, that's fine. But if you choose not to engage with the movie where the movie's at, you really can't blame the movie for that. If you don't want, you just say, I don't want to. That's fine, but
but isn't the movie supposed to engage me, and tell me what's going on? But not this one, because it doesn't tell you anything. You're just supposed to pick up with the stuff that they're laying down, but they're not laying down anything to get me engaged.
But that's what they're doing. They're putting it out there for you to engage with. You choose not to engage with it. Again, it's fine if you don't want to, but you're not meeting the movie where it's asking you to go.
Scott had to pause it and rewind and watch it for 2 hours. Is that what everybody was supposed to do? Yeah, I didn't get. Okay, well, next time you bring a movie, I need the rules of how to watch a film, because normally I click play and I ended at the end. If that wasn't the assignment, I failed it.
That's fine.
Every movie got the same treatment.
That's fine. That's fine. Like I said, if you're not if you're not interested, if you see it once and you're okay, that I'm not interested, then you're just not interested. But if you that's the movie requires a little extra work, and I'm okay with that. If you're not, you're not.
I found a new type of level of hell and hate that I have is a movie that requires more work than required to watch it from start to finish.
I'm happy to put in extra work when there's a reward to be benefited.
Yeah.
Back to my white puzzle thing. I'm not rebuilding this puzzle again, just like
I disagree. I disagree with that. I think it's very fulfilling when you. And again, I don't claim to have it all figured out, but I think there's a lot there to mine.
How many times have you seen this?
I think this is my third.
And
again, like I said, I'm not there yet. I can't tell you everything that's happening and everything that made sense.
Who won the March Madness game? That's the important question. The March Madness game that he was listening to. Yeah.
Okay, we will.
Fruits here.
We will get scores.
Come in.
So we're going to start with Kirk.
You were muted.
4.
We'll start with Kirk. 4. Boatman.
I'm going to stick to my original guns and not be swayed. 3.5, but I was thinking maybe lower.
Okay, Zach.
2.
Okay.
Out of 10. No, 2 out of 5.
Scott.
I do give it 3 again because it was like kind of fun in the moment to try and put everything together, but then doesn't really have any staying power. 3.
Brian.
Based on my single viewing, it'd be 2.
1.5. And I think that's being generous.
Good month.
This was not a good week for me.
Well, wait until you see next episode, Kirk. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, we'll tease that at the end because I'm so excited for next week. All right, Boatman, tell us what you picked.
Yeah. So the movie I picked was 7 Days in May. I picked this one because this was one of the few movies that on Letterboxd I was the only one who had seen it, and this was a movie I really liked, and I've never heard anybody talk about it, so I wanted to bring it up. I basically discovered it on accident. I was just like, I think I was looking through like Martin Balsam's filmography, and I was like, this looks interesting.
That checks out.
Yeah, no, like that's a dude who he's never like the number one performance in a movie, but he's always solid, and he's in so many great ensembles. Yeah. Like if Martin Balsam's in your movie, odds are like 5 or 6 other big actors are also in your movie. But anyway, this is kind of the third. This is kind of the RC Cola of the Coke versus Pepsi that was Dr. Strangelove versus Failsafe. This is kind of the third 1964 Cold War paranoia nuclear movie, and I actually really like it. I think that the dynamics of you have Burt Lancaster, who's just one of my favorite actors, as this general who is kind of potentially, starting a coup against the sitting president, played by Friedrich March, who's an actor I don't typically like all that much. I think he's usually a little overrated. This is maybe my favorite performance of his. I really like him as this president who is just completely like failing at his job. Like just, a president that is just getting terrible approval ratings, just not a popular president. And Kirk Douglas, I think, is a really interesting character as someone who disagrees with this president, but also strongly disagrees with the methods Lancaster is going to use. You also have Edmund O'Brien, who got nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I don't know if I would actually agree with that nomination, but I think he's really fun. I really like him as this drunk senator. I think that's a lot of fun. And Ava Gardner's also very good. But overall, I just really like kind of the intrigue going on, and I think the philosophies at debate in terms of, especially at the time of when is this nuke, like, when is this, like, are we just building something for the sake of so we have to use it, or is this really a good deterrent? I think that's really interesting. And I think, kind of them exposing, and I really love the final confrontation before the actual climax between Lancaster and March. I think that's really compelling. Like, if you want to, challenge me, do it in the elected office, do it through the proper channels. I think that's really interesting. I just found this movie really fascinating. Nobody's talked about it, and I don't know anyone who had seen it, so I wanted to bring this up.
I assumed that I was absolutely love this film. I liked it. I didn't love it. There were elements. I love Burt Lancaster. I love Kirk Douglas, and I wanted, I guess, a little bit more from that. Maybe the supporting spots I don't love as much throughout the film, but the intrigue was those two just bring so much, especially that very first scene where they're sitting at the table and he's getting grilled by the senator, and Lancaster is just putting him in his place across the way. But then how corrupt the government basically is you're gonna still do this for us, and hunt down follow Lancaster, basically figure out what's going on. So I did enjoy overall that part of the film. I just loved how you started. I was in the filmography of Martin Balsam. I was like, as someone does, as someone just chills, and that's the most Boatman answer I've ever heard in my life. But no, I mean, I'm glad I saw this, and I think it's one that the more I watch it, I think it could go up for me for sure. Just on few watching and having to cram movies near the end, it just was one that was not absolute love. Everybody else on this movie.
I am also someone who will watch a movie because Martin Balsam's in it. I was very excited to see that. But also, the one thing that I got excited when I saw about this one is that the script was written by Rod Serling. And I'm a big Twilight Zone fan, and he's other good stuff. He wrote the Planet of the Apes movie, the original '68. So I was excited, and that's a big thing of his. Nuclear. If you watch Twilight Zone, nuclear war and anti-war stuff is was a big deal for him. So I was really excited about that. And the tone of the movie is just really cool to me. The beginning, that first scene of the protest to me, it was shot like a horror movie. It looked like Night of the Living Dead or something with the two, counter protesting groups clashing. And then there's scenes in there the airport scene where the one guy gets abandoned by the officer that was there. That felt like Hitchcock. A lot of this movie feels like Hitchcock. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. There's political stuff. There's intrigue and thriller. I like all that. My biggest downer for me again. Was the romance. Ava Gardner's character was just kind of a throwaway in this. She was just there because she had to be. And then the biggest. Do we spoil movies on this show? Can we talk about endings? The ending for me, I thought was a little too. I loved the scene Boatman talked about with the final confrontation between the two of them. I loved. But the ending was a little too cut and dry for me. I was hoping for something, especially with Serling writing it. I was hoping for something a little more cynical, a little more at least open ended, and it kind of ends with rah rah. We're going to get through this because America's awesome, and we can overcome this. And I kind of wish
is the last 50 years of actual history that followed this movie not cynical enough for you, Kurt?
And I think maybe that's the lens I'm looking at it through. I feel because the scene that previous scene that Boatman referred to is kind of leading up to that. You can't beat this. This is just inevitable. And then they kind of just it might have been studio notes. I don't know.
I was gonna say that feels like a studio note, to be honest. I feel like Serling probably had a much darker original ending, and they were like, "This is Cold War paranoia. Nobody wants to watch in 1964 a movie where the nuke drops and maybe Slim Pickens rides that nuke down while the song "We'll Meet Again" starts playing."
I think not to live in an alternate world instead of taking what the movie gave us, but I kind of agree. The ending to me is just dragged on too much and really changed Burt Lancaster's character, who is very controlled throughout this whole time. And then all of a sudden he's just nope, I'm the villain. I'm going to keep going and fighting it and going to do what I want. I will give this speech. God damn it, I'm not going to give in. But I think there's something smart. I think maybe a better ending would be it just goes and he announces his candidacy for presidency. So he's I'm not giving up. I'm going to do it the way he wants. It's still that kind of moral victory the movie wants you to have, but it's also this fuckhead still, within our system can control and make these decisions like that. Because he probably would have got elected anyways, because the society in this movie were all filmed as like chaos agents. They just wanted nuclear war. We need someone. No treaty. That's a weird side to be on. But
I do feel like it had like that kind of like that Crimson Tide feel, where it was like you kind of see Burt Lancaster's point. It's like, can we trust them? Is this the smart thing to do? Like the treaty may have been a bad idea. Like the movie doesn't like hide. Like the president may have done the wrong thing, and like Burt Lancaster is going the wrong way about it. But to him, it's like, I'm saving the world by doing this.
I really like that Crimson Tide comparison, because I can totally see that, because that's one thing I've always loved about that movie is like neither person's really wrong. You know, you kind of got to choose a side, but when it comes down to it, they're both doing really what they should be doing, and it's just a matter of different approaches to things. And actually, a lot of the influences, you notice, like you talked about at the beginning, felt like a 60s horror film, and then the Hitchcock influences, I can totally see that. But more than anything else, this movie felt to me like a big like two-parter episode of The West Wing. Just in terms of like, you know, that they're dealing with like, you know, the everything from the treaty and the conversations in the Oval Office, things like that, all the way to this, you know, this possible military coup that's coming, and kind of people through back channels and like spying on other people and bringing information. And now I don't consider that a bad thing at all, because West Wing is one of the best shows ever made on television, and obviously it came well after this movie. So I'm not trying to say like this is copying West Wing by any means. But that's what it felt like. And that's, I think, why I enjoyed it as much as I did, is because I really like that kind of thing. And this is the kind of movie that I don't know if it would ever be put in theaters right now. This is the kind of thing that would now be made for cable or I mean, not for cable, streaming or something like that. And so to be able to see a full, you know, feature film like this, and it's one that I didn't really know anything about. When I look at older movies, all the titles and everything's kind of run together. I don't know anything about a lot of older movies. So I kind of leave it to other people to kind of recommend them to me. So when something like this comes up, and was it Boatman? I think you brought this. Yeah. So when you bring that one, I'm like, okay, this is one I should check out. And I watch it, and I was actually very happy I did.
So I definitely enjoyed it overall. I mean, I liked the ending. Like, again, maybe I'm bringing the baggage of the many decades that followed this into the movie, but I felt like it kind of rang hollow in a way, like his speech and everything at the end. Like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could, if you know, this was actually going to work out, but do we actually believe that? And honestly, I think the same thing about Ava Gardner, her character. Like, I think that is definitely the weak part of the movie, the part that has aged the worst, because it's like they go out of their way to make this whole point about, well, you know, we're trying to stop the coup, right? But there's a right way to do it, right? There's a right way to do it, and it's not by using the guy's personal letters or whatever against him, right? We're going to go about this the moral and just way. And I just thought that was kind of like honestly, looking back on it now, it's laughable when you look at the way that politics are nowadays. Like, that people will do the most despicable things for the most, you know, petty, insignificant, like, political wins or whatever. Look at somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever. Like,
I mean,
she would have brought those letters out before, like, Ava Gardner could have even finished reading them or whatever. Like,
this is the 1960s version of Anthony Weiner's dick pics. So,
so that part of it, yeah, not the best. But the rest of the movie I thought was very exciting, very, you know, suspenseful, and yeah, interesting. Like, the anti-war stance is interesting for the time. You know, you mentioned the Cold War, but obviously Vietnam was going on at this point too. So you think about the idea of this president being perceived as like weak because he's, you know, not interventionist, he's pacifist. Interesting, you know, idea for the time for sure. And I agree. I think Frederick March is like really fantastic at the movie. Maybe the standout performance, just the sort of the tortured figure that he is, and dealing with his own lack of popularity, and now the fact that like one of his closest advisors is trying to overthrow him, and then what happens with his close friends, right, and Edmund O'Brien and his other friend and everything. I thought all of that was great. I really liked Kirk Douglas as well in the movie. Like, I think between this and Paths of Glory, like when he plays like the soldier, the idealistic soldier, right, who is like resisting the establishment and the system, like that's like a perfect role for him. He has like that I guess, fundamental like goodness or something about him to where like you always believe in him as like this guy is going to get us through this. Like he has the right intentions, and we can believe in him. So I thought he did a really good job. Yeah, it's a really good thriller for the time period. Great cast, interesting, commentary for especially for 1964. One or two things that I might have tweaked, but it's a really solid movie overall.
It's a great capital H Hollywood. It is just very much you get to see these great important actors giving speeches against each other.
Yeah.
On the old kind of a different kind of action movie in a way, action of words. But what is also is really important is that the movie is not at all about the nuclear bomb or the treaty or those ideas. That's why they have the same thing. It's because what it really cares about is when you disagree, what's the methods that are appropriate to take that. It just uses the rest as this padding to make that point. It's interesting.
Okay. Boatman, what's your rating?
I was going back and forth on this. I think I'm going to go 4.5. I'm going to stick to what I originally rated it. I'm going to go 4.5. I'll admit it's on the weaker end of 4.5 than it was when I first saw it, but still, I think it holds up well enough. I'm going to stick to my guns.
Okay. Zach.
I'll go with 4.
Okay, I'm going 3.5. I think it could get better, but I didn't overall love it. Again, Burt Lancaster is great in most everything. Scott.
4 stars, really good.
Brian.
3.5.
Kirk.
Real close between 3.5 and 4. I think if it was stuck to landing, it would have been 4. But I'm going to go to 3.5.
Okay. And we're on to the last movie of the night, the movie that I brought. I brought 2014's Fury. The reason why I brought Fury is because I saw it in 2014. I really liked it in 2014. I haven't seen it since. So I wanted to basically see how it held up over that long of a watch. And I will say very well for me. I think this movie is absolutely brutal. I think this movie shows war in like the most like not redeeming light of all time. It's very hard to watch for certain scenes. There are some great scenes overall throughout this movie, but there's some very uncomfortable scenes. Like I don't think I've ever if I had to rank like uncomfortable scenes, like when they when Brad Pitt and them are up in the house or the apartment and the other guys show up and they're all just sitting around, the amount of just like tension and like disgust and like is with them is just so much. And then the scenes that follow after that, like the new guy gets into war, like gets put into war 8 weeks into war, gets with this veteran group and is definitely not cut out for war whatsoever, and basically is like stealing his youth at the time. And he it's basically his life of how it is throughout it. So that scene is very rough, and then the girl ends up dying. I still think that tank battle that they have in that field is like one of the coolest shot scenes like in a movie I've seen in a while, and it lived up to the hype on rewatch. But just I got a lot of Lieutenant Aldo Rain a little bit in this, but less funny. He definitely got back into that character a little bit in parts. You can see how he talks to people and how he interacts, but like you actually see like a brutal side of Brad Pitt. Like he's not the most likable character on screen, which is sometimes you don't see that in film. So to see that play out and just how brutal this movie actually plays out and how the movie ends, it lived up to the hype for me again after rewatch. I thought it was just a one and go, like, 2014, that's a really great movie. Let's move on. Never really wanted to watch it again, but I definitely enjoyed it. I'm curious to see everybody. I think when I was logging this, you guys may have seen it, but I didn't see a lot of people have logged it because, before Letterboxd or never going back to it and seeing it after that. So I'm curious to see what everybody else's thoughts on this. So anybody not see this before? Okay. So I'm everybody that rewatched it, I'm kind of curious of like your guys' thoughts because technically, I guess it's been near as long or a little bit maybe after the fact, but I don't remember a lot of you guys log on. So go ahead.
Yeah, I saw it when it first came out too. This is my first rewatch since, and I liked it then. I think I liked it more now. I think it locked, and I think just having, and yeah, I mean, he's Aldo Raines on Ritalin in this movie. Like he's very, just like a very subdued version of that character. I love the tank battles that you mentioned. I think are great. The one cool thing about it, I realized from the first time I watched this movie, I've never seen tracer rounds in color before. Like you always see that black and white footage of like the bright lights shooting, but you never see them. And I have no idea if that's really what they look like or not. But I think it's really cool that they put that into the movie. You see tons of World War II movies, you never see tracer rounds. And I like the tank battles the way they very much showed like from a technical level how they worked. Them barking out commands and what they're doing. And I like the fact that in the battle scenes, they gave you the dialogue going in from the opponents, from the German tanks or whatever. Like you could hear what they were saying. So it was like a chess match. And you saw them actually like what their both objectives were, how they plan to defeat each other. So from a strategic point, it was just really interesting to watch that. At the same time, I think it did a really good job of showing the effect that had on the characters. You got to see them from a professional standpoint doing their jobs, but also, the wear and tear that it did from the characters. And I just love that basically every, Norman's the focus, and the effect the war is having on him. But I like that he's brought in a situation where the war has impacted and affected everybody else different. Like Brad Pitt's character is kind of pragmatic. Like he's still trying to maintain his moral center, but like he's like, you shoot this guy in the head right now because I need you to be able to kill. Because that's what we're here to do. We're just here to kill people. That's our job right now, and that's just it is what it is. We got to deal with it. And where Bible is, he's relying on his faith. Like he believes there's some purpose to all this. And then John Bernthal's character has basically just like given himself over, and he's not even really human anymore. And the movie is just which way is Norman going to go? Like how will the war affect him? How will it change him? And I really like that aspect. So I think from basically a war movie standpoint, it's great. From a character study, it's also great.
It seems like every decade there's like at least one like big war ensemble film, whether it be like, from Platoon to Saving Private Ryan to, Black Hawk Down or things like that, where it just puts together like this great cast of like, young actors and it puts them in this thing. And more often than not, it turns out to be a really good movie. And Fury is one that I liked when it first came out, but I the very first time I watched it, I gave it a little bit lower rating, but it's gone up since then. Because I just really like the way it's done. Like Kirk said, it as far as technically kind of shows you how the strategy of war works out and everything like that. But more than anything else, it's about, basically this small group of guys and they, basically live in this tank and how the war affects them because, not only the effects of, the war itself and the violence, things like that, but the effects it has on the people themselves. Because like, I think it was Platoon, like the tagline was like the first casualty of war is innocence. And I kind of feel like that actually applies even more to this movie because like, especially with Norman Machine, I think. Yeah. Machine. He starts out as this kid who, he doesn't want to shoot anybody. He won't do anything. And by the end, he's like, fuck you Nazis, you better run. And he's like, blowing him away. And he's kind of degraded into that kind of person. And then it just kind of takes everyone and all civilities lost, everything. Like, 'cause there's a moment in the scene you were talking about, Cody, in the house where they're having breakfast and things like that. Is this whole area where they kind of find this oasis from the war. It's like, hey, this is almost like back to normal life. We have peace, we have comfort, everyone can act civilly towards each other. But the next thing you know, those guys are bursting in the room and acting like a bunch of, animals and pigs. And it kind of ruins any sense of, peace that they might have had, even just for a short moment. And so I think that as much as it is absolutely, a war movie as far as showing the fighting and the violence, and it's all about the tank battles and things like this, it's just as much very personal about how it affects the people.
Yeah, I saw it when it came out and I was really into it. And then it went way down for me when we watched it. Maybe it's the lack of watching it on the big screen that I wasn't as entranced by the visuals, which I still think are pretty striking, and by the action scenes. And then I get watch a small screen, I get more caught up in thinking about the ideas or lack thereof. I mean, Brian mentioned some of them, which I agree, but I maybe this is my own like moral philosophy is kind of taking control too much, but I felt like his idea was these guys are all assholes. The war makes them assholes, and that's also what they should be. And probably the right thing is we all should be assholes. And it's a little bit of this like weird kind of masculinity, because they're just like not feeling nice enough when they're doing like truly horrible things, like going and harassing the girl in that house. I actually love the making her own family scene. And I think my mind liked it so much that I enhanced it because I definitely thought it was like at least half hour, if not longer. And I felt like they could kind of go in and get out. And I found that a little frustrating on the rewatch because I think that would have been a more interesting layer to dive into rather than look how brutal war is. And maybe that's now, we just had All Quiet on the Western Front, which took a lot of discourse for just being like, war is rough. We all know it. And that might have been something else, another extracurricular idea I've kind of taken into this. I was like, I don't need any more movies that are just like, yeah, war is shit. Like, So.
This was my first time watching it. Yeah, I wanted to like it more than I did. Ultimately, I found parts of it to be pretty like cliche, over the top. Use whatever. Like, I did not. John Bernthal, I thought that character was a cartoon character.
He was playing that like borderline mentally challenged. It
was rough. And even Shia LaBeouf, some of him is like, oh, he's Bible and quoting on the Bible verses and all that. I just felt like that stuff was kind of played out. I found the action scenes to be a little too video gamey in a way. Like, again, just like the look of the rounds and like the freaking laser look of it all was just like it took me out of the moment. Like it didn't, realistic or not, like it's not something that I'm used to seeing, and it took me out of what I know they were trying to do, which was have a really gritty, realistic feel to it. Yeah, some of the stuff like in the tank, some of the mind games and all that is a little bit more successful, but then you get to the end and it's like I don't really know how the movie wants me to feel, because the whole time it's like, yeah, war is hell. Like, obviously it's portraying like the horrors of war and how it's affected this kid. But then it's like they do kind of want you to be like admire them in some way in the end when they're there in the tank and they're like having their last stand or whatever. And I just felt like it was kind of discordant with what the rest of the movie was trying to do. And I liked the final moment of Logan Lerman like being rescued or whatever, and they're like, hey, you did it or whatever. And it's like, well, no, like what just happened was horrifying and traumatic and everything. But there are just other moments where it feels like the movie is kind of like, well, they were heroes and in their own way. That just didn't really sit right with me, given what is portrayed in the rest of the film. And the Brad Pitt character too, like, I'm not sure how we're meant to feel in the end, but I certainly didn't think he was very redeemable. Like when he makes Logan Lerman like shoot the guy or whatever, like puts the gun in his hand, and I was like, no, man. So this one was tough for me. I didn't feel like it had anything really interesting to say about the whole situation. A few moments that were kind of contradictory to me, and the look of the movie just isn't something that I was really into. It was, parts of it were immersive, but then other parts of it like ripped me out of it.
I will. Good, Boatman. Just let me say this real quick. I would say that, because I'm not going to be like, when you say that you don't know how the movie wants you to feel about it, to me, that's more of a feature than a flaw. Like, I like the fact that it's, because the whole situation's ambiguous. So I like how we're supposed to, our feelings.
But I think the whole movie is designed towards, like we're saying, like the war is hell mentality. It's just when we get towards the end, it's like all of a sudden it seems like they introduce ambiguity into it, and I'm not really sure why or for what purpose.
So to just kind of go off of that quick before I give overall thoughts, I think that every war movie lives in the contradiction, in that every war movie glorifies war and every war movie admonishes it. Regardless of how pro or anti-war the movie itself is, I think every war movie lives in those two contradictions. In terms of the actual movie, I actually really liked it. I think containing the movie to the tank, I think, was a really great idea of essentially distilling the whole experience of World War II down to just this one area and one element. Of course, the tank moves and goes all these different places, but still, essentially distilling it down to that one way. I like the whole cast. John Bernthal didn't really bother me. He wasn't one of the standouts or anything, but he didn't really bother me. The performance I actually really liked of this movie. And I'm kind of coming to the realization that this is an actor that I disliked because the internet told me to dislike him when I was 12. Shia LaBeouf is a good actor, guys.
Yeah.
I think Shia LaBeouf is actually a really good actor. I think people were mad about the fact that there was a human character at all in the Transformers movies, and they were mad that Indiana Jones had a son. And I think the internet decided that he was the reason those movies sucked. I don't think
he didn't help it when he went apeshit for a while there too. So
I mean that's true. He's weird.
He's still going apeshit.
Yes. I mean he's a weirdo psychopath, but I think he is a legit. I mean people hated him before he was a weirdo psychopath.
Yeah.
You could argue he became a weirdo psychopath because people hated him so much. Regardless, I actually think he's really good in this. And I don't want to talk about it too much because you guys all touched on it, but I loved the breakfast scene. I think the dynamics at play there once they entered into the room was like so good, and essentially people almost saying exactly what they mean. And the fact that there's really this like play for power, and John Bernthal is almost like trying to get this upper hand, and then Pitt just finally grabs the reins there, I think is really neat. And yeah, I will say, Kirk, I didn't know the thing that you're talking about the colored tracers.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really dumb stylistic choice. And now that I know that, oh, that's an actual thing, I feel like that's less stupid because if it's realistic, I don't care if it looks stupid. That's the way it was.
That's my point though, is like you've never seen it depicted in that way before. I understand it may be realistic, but like for me, it just can't help but like take me out of it and like be like, wait a second, am I watching Star Wars now all of a sudden?
Well, they
I'm
explain
not like that's one of all the other
where you're
movies
shooting.
for being less realistic.
What'd you say, Brian?
I said because they explain in the movie like every fifth round is a tracer, so that you can tell where you're shooting at.
Yeah. So my thing is, I'm not surprised at who hates it and who doesn't like it as much and who does. I'm just thinking like I enjoy like like where he has to force the kid to kill somebody because at the end of the day, that's his life on the line, and like they use kids to against their will to let down their guard to kill them. Like so they have to make them as brutal because if he doesn't do it, it's a bullet in his back. And like it even
I didn't feel like they were supposed to I know like Scott didn't like that scene, but I didn't feel like you were supposed to like what he was doing. I think you're supposed to feel like kind of disgusted by the scene. Yeah.
No,
like,
yes, I agree. Like you absolutely are. But that was the problem with me is I just what they were doing with the Brad Pitt character just seemed kind of bipolar how they wanted.
But I mean, I think it's a bipolar situation because it's like, he doesn't want to make this kid murder somebody, but it's like if he doesn't learn to kill, then all these guys that I'm responsible for are now in danger because he's not able to do.
I didn't buy during the breakfast scene like the kind of maybe he has a little bit of a heart sort of thing, like where he's stopping.
I think that's why he and him are up there and the rest are down there because he's trying to get him a break from the war elements that it is. And that's why when he breaks in, it breaks that part. And he's like, you're not going to ruin this for me. And I think it's very an interesting part is when he breaks it down to the kid is I've been started killing Nazis in Africa and into this and now into Germany. I'm doing this all over the place and I have to. I didn't really, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but like the tank battle that seemed video game-ish, I don't see that at all. I see that as a very like real technical way to like get to the end of it because Video game, I think they just blow it up instantly, but they have to like maneuver it, and it ends up taking out 2 of them. And I think that's where when they finally finish that task, and like Shia LaBeouf's like best job I ever had, like they come back to reality because they're still alive, but it's arguably not. Again, I wanted to rewatch it. It went high for me, higher than I probably when I first originally watched it. So we'll get scores. I'm 4.5. I'm 4.5. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I think it's brutal. I think the time away from it made it more brutal for me. And go back to it. Zach,
2.5.
original 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Different person.
And I also love that you were like David Ayer. That's a director to keep his eye out. Look out for.
I was convinced between that and whatchamacallit,
End of Watch.
Movie, I was like, End of Watch. I thought so.
You're like,
that,
bring on
that aged
Brian
bad.
Suicide Squad.
I need to delete whatever I wrote back then.
I looked at it today after I watched it. I'm like, oh, we'll see how he feels now. I knew it was going down. Scott.
2.5.
That's fair. I hated girlfriend, so we're even on that, I guess. Scott,
I didn't hate
Brian.
her.
4
No,
stars.
that's true. Okay. Kirk.
I'm 4, and on a quick Google search here, there were multicolored tracer rounds used in World War II, and it looked like even some countries used their own.
I'm not doubting it. I'm
no,
not
I'm just
doubting
because
it.
I wasn't sure.
No, he said he didn't know. So
Because honestly, it did look a little Star Wars to me. So like, I was wondering if that's really how it looked. Like each country had their own color, But
that's like my grandfather watching war movies. They didn't use that shit back then.
Yeah.
It's a movie. Shut the fuck up and watch it. You got 4. Brian.
I said 4.
Oh no, sorry. I said
Let's
Brian.
give
I
it
looked
4.
at Boatman.
It has not
Boatman.
changed since I said
4.
4. Okay. All right. Well, that's the round table. Thanks everybody for being on. It was a blast. I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna do a teaser at the end. Next month might be the end of the show. I'm gonna be real honest with you. I'm not 100% sure if I can get going. We're gonna have Brooklyn, Spence, Mark, Brian, Scott, and myself, and the movies that have been chosen. Pogie Beach, Minding the Gap, Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, Power Rangers 2017.
Oh my god!
Terrifier 2, and the original Wicker Man. So find out if we're here for episode 11.
I can't wait for in-depth Power Rangers analysis. That's going to be awesome.
Bye-bye.